Hello everyone, and welcome to another Top 5 Records video, and another one in the series in which I'm taking a closer look at the full body of work of David Bowie. And this video is a rather special one. Why? Because I named it The Story of David Bowie's Unreleased Album. So instead of just a review of the album, I think it's important to tell and share the story of this album, which a lot of people have not even heard about. Now, it says unreleased. This album was unreleased at the time, but luckily what I'm holding here is not a bootleg. In 2016, just a couple of months after David Bowie's death, they released this album the way Tony Visconti actually mixed it in the day. Now, what was going on? In 1974, David Bowie was doing his Diamond Dogs tour. He was struggling with the form and the way he was performing. Also, there were some financial issues which made it impossible for him to play the show he initially intended it, like a big dramatic staging. But something else was going on at the same time. Bowie was dating, having a new love in his life. He was dating a black vocalist. And why do I specifically point that out? Well, she was an important part of, I believe, the Chicago black music scene. So Bowie got into different places, listened to different kinds of songs, and got acquainted with funk and soul, and it really got into his bones. There was never a moment that he thought, soul is getting bigger with the younger generation, and I'm gonna dive into that. No, it became part of his personal life. So Bowie noticed he had to change his tune and had to change his tone. What you can also hear during the Diamond Dogs tour, and I've spoken about that in the videos of the Correct Actor Live album and the David Live album, that there is fatigue. And Bowie, you can hear his voice is growing thinner and less powerful. Well, that has to do with his lifestyle was horrible at that time. Tony Visconti described the moment that he had been called by Bowie to get to Philadelphia to record a new album, namely the Gouster, that when he met him he noticed Bowie is even thinner and paler than usually. Now, he was on a diet of milk, red peppers and cocaine at the time, rarely sleeping, and he was entering a situation of, and I'll be talking about that during the Station to Station video, but he was going into insanity. And Bowie also described it later on that these were the years in which those were the darkest days of his life. Yet he kept searching for a new form, and he had found an output, namely soul music. And somehow, I'm not sure how, but somehow he got able to get his voice in the right condition to sing soul. Not as beautiful and powerful as most of the soul artists who had energy and power. If you think of someone like Aretha Franklin or Sam Cooke or Otis Redding, there are so many beautiful, powerful soul voices. Now, Bowie had the same urgency, and you can hear that on this album. He had the same urgency, but he was broken down. His voice is a smoked cocaine down and out white man's voice, which is in so many regards completely different. But I do get the idea that he was very close to the essence of soul. And you rarely have that with white artists. Now, this album, Tony Visconti got to Philadelphia. They went into a recording studio. They had been playing and recording some before that, but Bowie was unhappy with the sound. So Tony Visconti did some things that were uncommon in the USA in those days. He was trained the British way, and that meant that he put equalizing and compression on the microphones. So you have a different way of listening to the voices and the way the voices are recorded. Obviously, it changes the process. It changes the way you respond to your own voice. It changes the way It sounds obviously, instead of doing that, the compression and the equalizing during mixing. And this way he set up a situation also with a microphone at the back of Bowie's neck, so they could do a live session. And that's very important with regard to this album, because he cut the band out of phase, so he could get the bleeding of the band on Bowie's microphone out of Bowie's microphone. So you have a very clear representation of Bowie's voice. You have a very good representation of the band. And this way, the Gouster was recorded in live sessions. Trust me on this. This album is worthwhile even just for that element. Because there is a serious groove going on. And that live feeling. A raw studio feeling. But that live studio feeling gives this so much more extra than what Bowie later on did with Young Americans. Some of the recordings of this album are on Young Americans. But it's so coherent. And there's such a vibe going on. And although this is a bit raw, I mean, Young Americans is a polished album. The Gouster still sounds spectacular because of the brilliant recording techniques and a brilliant way of mixing Visconti, but it's edgier. And it's so much more of a rough, raw soul. Now, Gouster, by the way, that's the title of the album, but we choose that because in the 70s in Chicago, that was, I believe, slang for a certain unique, hip way of identifying. I believe it was mostly in the black scene, and Bowie was really into that. So, now, they recorded in I believe, about 2 weeks. Visconti started mixing it. Visconti and Bowie, through DHL packaging and sending, were discussing the mix, and that process took some time, and then Bowie had other songs in mind. He felt that the album, on one hand, was not finished yet, but on the other, and that's also something I read, that Visconti said Bowie was afraid some songs on this album were too personal. So he left about 3 songs on these sessions of the album. And 3 songs sounds like little, but it's almost 20 minutes of gorgeous, gorgeous music. And if you ask me, some of his best. So Bowie was working on Gouster, and then after a while, Visconti got a message from him that said, I met up with John Lennon. Sorry, I do the most horrible Bowie imitation. I met up with John Lennon, and he was really into doing a session, so we recorded some of his songs over here, and I'd like to include it on the album. I'm so sorry if I'm insulting anyone with this horrible accent, but I just can't help it. Now, he added different songs. He added John Lennon songs. He added Across the Universe, and eventually, Young Americans, seriously, is a different album than this. So what is this? Now, starting off with the opening track, John, I'm Only Dancing Again, which is 7 minutes long. It's a rendition of the other Bowie song, John, I'm Only Dancing, but this is a soul, funkier, disco kinds of rendition. And there's something going on with Bowie's voice here. He is almost whispering in your ear. It's almost as if he's blowing the lyrics in your ear, you know. It's so intimate. There's something going on. It's very groovy. It's in nothing reminds me of actually the original glam rock song. Awesome song. Then we get to Somebody Up There Likes Me, which is also on Young Americans, and I'll discuss it when I get to that album. Then you get It's Gonna Be Me. It's Gonna Be Me. Not on Young Americans. Only on the Gouster. One of Bowie's finest hours as a vocalist. This is such an incredible, powerful song. The overall sound, the fragility of his singing. I seriously dare, if during this series of videos, I'm gonna encounter a more intimate moment of true, sincere, fragile David Bowie than his vocal performance on It's Gonna Be Me. As a matter of fact, Tony Visconti said about it, that was a vocal performance once in a lifetime. Now, why did David Bowie not use that for Young Americans? Was it too personal? Was it too personal of a song? I'll keep it in mind. I'm gonna reflect on that, because what is personal music making for David Bowie and in his world? And was this beyond what he could tolerate from showing himself? I'm gonna keep it in mind in the videos. I'm gonna reflect on that. Now you get Who Can I Be Now? Another great song. That's also the name of the box set in which this is released. I have it here. And as a matter of fact, the Gouster, Who Can I Be Now? The Gouster was for me the biggest reason to buy that box, because it's the only way to get it. It's the only way to get the official later release this album. The rest of the album is also good and very coherent because it's this live session. So you have Can You Hear Me, Young Americans and Right, which are also on the Young Americans album. But overall, the set list, songs that were not released, and the incredible raw power, the mixing, the quality, this is to me a unique David Bowie album. And I do not understand why this has not been released. I think it's more coherent than Young Americans. But I'll get to that in the Young Americans video. I'm even thinking of letting this challenge Young Americans, because Young Americans obviously has Fame, which is a masterpiece of a song. It does not have It's Gonna Be Me. And Young Americans has Across the Universe, which, John Lennon even said, I don't know why he did that. Sorry, I had a bad impression. I don't know why he did that. I didn't even like my own version. But we're gonna get to that in the Young Americans video. For now, in this series, the Gouster, I love it.